folks, we're getting ready to begin. So please take your seats. I'll introduce a representative of the Ohio No-Till Council here in just a minute. I want to draw your attention. We do have several sponsors. They're sponsors for the Ohio No-Till Council and Conservation Tillage Conference. We've got that information. And then, you may not be aware, today is World Soil Day. I think they found out we had our conference scheduled today, so they said World Soil Day to match up with it. Appreciate it. And definitely we're learning all about soil health here today. And with that, Shannon Layton's going to provide a little welcome.
Well, it's good to see everybody here. I happened to think back to a year ago today, and we had combines running in the field because our crowd was down some last year because there was a lot of crop left. So I think there's still a little bit of crop left this year, but very little. So it's good to see all of you. A little background: the No-Till Council is a group of folks that want to promote no-till, and now the buzzword is soil health. And so it's just a group of people who get together and try to promote and provide educational things and mentor people and so on. So I think we've got a whale of a lineup of really good speakers today with a lot of know-how and a lot of knowledge. And so I hope you have a good day today. There's some CCA credits available as well. So those of you that are in need of those. So without any further ado, I don't have the agenda in front of me, but are we starting right out with Mark? We're starting out with a panel first, okay. So first of all, we're going to have a panel of no-till farmers and cover crop experts. And that is Nathan Brazzi from Crawford County, and he's on the council. Cody Beacom and Jay Brandt, Glenn Harsh, and Eric Meyer. So if you folks would like to head this way, we'll start with a panel.
And I think since we got a little smaller stage, we'll just stand here in front of the stage. Cody is going to begin with a show of pictures. So get this switched to his presentation.
All right, good morning. Thank you all for coming out today. Many familiar faces today. I know a lot of you were at the Ohio No-Till Field Day back on the 29th of August and probably saw our plots there. Many of you here might not have seen them. Just want to do a quick recap, kind of cover some of the real brief findings we came across out there, and I think you'll be pretty impressed with what we found. So when we designed these plots, we had a couple different goals. Mainly this year, especially with the prevent plan, we wanted to appeal to some of the folks who might not have utilized cover crops before or had very limited experience. Also wanted to kind of show folks who might be familiar with cover crops some next level stuff. So that being said, we had a lot of different species out there, many folks might not have seen before, and many pretty complex mixes. And also, we really wanted to showcase the power of some of these multi-species mixes. So, a little bit of background. These plots were planted after oats were harvested and a shot of glyphosate sprayed, and we did get the plots planted on the 3rd of August. Field day was on the 29th, and only 26 days in between. So, of note here, and I know anybody that was there can attest to this, the plots look pretty darn good, especially for very limited rainfall. And so we kind of went back just a couple weeks ago and looked at some of these plots, which were broken down into 13 individual plots, three basic categories: winter kill, overwintering, and also we had some forage plots as well. And the primary goal there was I know there's a lot of folks with prevent plant ground this year that might not have done some type of summer forage. So we just wanted to show what the benefits of those summer annuals could be. Just going to cover some of our findings real brief here. And we'll start out kind of on the basic end of the spectrum. This is a winter kill mix, just very simple oats and radish. I know a lot of people kind of call this like a cover crop on training wheels. It winter kills, no real management in the spring, super easy. But I think most would agree what we found, this was just a couple weeks ago when we were out there digging around, that soil looks pretty respectable. And I just want you to take note of that. Look at the color, look at the structure, okay? Our next mix, again, we're just showing a few here just for the sake of time. This is about the middle of the pack. This is a 9-way mix. This is designed to go to corn this coming year. So we had a pretty heavy component of legumes in here with the intent of trying to fix nitrogen for the corn crop. And check out the difference there. Look at the color, look at the structure, especially the top couple inches, a lot more granular, and look at the roots also. And we're not even taking into account what's going on biologically here, so pretty impressive. So now we'll go to the far end of the spectrum. This is a 16-way mix, and I think it speaks for itself. Again, look at the color, look at the structure, and just look at the roots. What I found most impressive, and I know Nathan, you'll agree too, it was really neat when you even just stuck the spade in the ground here. You could almost just push it in with one hand. It was impressive. And mind you, these other two plots are 50 feet away. So this is the power of what we can do, especially once we get more cover crops in our mixes in a relatively short amount of time. This is about 3.5 months or so from when these plots were planted. So kind of some of the key takeaways, just real brief here. I think this goes to show 1 + 1 really does equal 3. So in other words, the more species we put in these mixes, our benefits are exponentially better, okay? Also, weed suppression, I think it goes without saying. It seems like pretty much across the board we saw here and certainly other places, the more species you get out there, typically your weed issues are less and less. And again, the more species we put in these mixes is kind of a built-in insurance policy. If one species doesn't do very well, it's likely that others will compensate and help out with that. So I guess my question for you folks is, if you have an opportunity to plant cover crops, certainly the option on the left, the oats and radishes, is good, but the 16-way mix is much better. Which would you prefer to have on your farm? So from there, I guess we'll open to
So the purpose of what we want to look at here now that we're looking forward into technical issue. So as we look towards the spring, we have our experience on David Brandt's farm. We've been planting into some high residue cover crops for the last 6 to 8 years and have collected some of those in movie format. So work through that. This starts back, I think, 2012 or 2013. And most of our corn planting goes in after small grain, whether it be wheat, oats, or cereal rye, or triticale that we harvest for grain. In this case, it was probably a wheat crop that we planted to a large mix. So this would have been back in 2013, 2015. So we're kind of seeing a progression through the years as we go through these. Early on, a lot of what we would have left in the spring would be legumes. We specifically like hairy vetch, which is primarily what you see here. And it's mostly hairy vetch and crimson clover remaining. So there's some sun hemp and sunflowers that you see standing in there, and generally they don't cause any issues for us from that standpoint because there's just not a lot of them. And they're fairly friable and fragile when you go through there. So our planter has always worked really well in this amount of residue. We're looking at biomass in the range of 5,000 to 10,000 pounds. This is a particularly heavy one, probably closer to about 15,000 pounds of biomass, so where we had to roll the cover crop first, just to some issues from there. Just looking at different scenarios that we have. And the key thing to look at in some of these videos is that there's not always a solid stand. So as we look towards the spring, we don't always expect the cover crop to be 100% everywhere because as soils vary and water capacities vary within the soils, you can see the different spots from that standpoint. So we looked at, I think this is back in 2017, some areas where we rolled ahead of the planter and then areas where we rolled after planting just to see if there was any issues as far as corn emergence and crop performance. And that year we didn't see much difference from that standpoint. So again, I think the purpose here is mainly just to see that it works. So here's with our grain drill. Here we had done some tile work the year before. So you can see the disruption where we had the cover crop in between where the tile was run. We generally like to plant into the standing cover crop because there's less residue to worry about as far as seed placement, depth of placement. Both of our planters seem to work very well, irregardless from that standpoint. You just have to pay attention to adjustments from that standpoint, but she's getting out and checking things. So you can see my son got a drone recently, so that's why we're getting these nice shots here. So it's tough because he does half the planting, so you got to catch the day right, but you can't run the drill to catch or something like that. So. And with the other thing that we see is the variation in height from the years. Some years you get some really nice weather in the spring and the cover crop gets really tall. In this case, this year, the field got ready to plant before the cover crop got too big. Or in our case, this isn't too big. So, but you know, that's one of the things you pay attention to when you're getting ready to plant. And here's some other videos that I pulled out of YouTube of some other farmers as well, so you can see different areas. This is a pretty light seeding of cereal rye, maybe between 20 and 30 pounds that he's planting into here. And again, if you get on YouTube and listen to it, he talks about how there's really no issue from that standpoint. Just a couple times to get used to planting into something that's that tall. It's a psychological issue. I tried to catch a couple different scenarios because as we looked at it between planting corn or planting soybeans, you know, some difference in the cover crop structure and from that standpoint. So here's another gentleman that's planting actually soybeans after a wheat crop where they planted just a little bit of wheat and rapeseed in this mix with some oats. So you can see it looks like he had some tile work done as well. In this case, and it's mainly the rape and a little bit of the wheat that came back in the spring that he's working with here. So So I think the interesting thing that he wanted to point out here is that he's using high-speed planting, so probably around 6 to 8 miles an hour with that Kinsey, and getting pretty good, per the comments in the video that you watched, fairly decent establishment after the fact. So if to look at planter mounted residue management, so this is the ZRX roller crimper attached to that white planter. Some fairly tall rye in this case, and he has the row cleaner set fairly aggressively in this case. Not something I want to do on some fairly steep slopes, but it is one way to, like I say, improve the planter performance is to clear the path in front of the planter. So there's options with the ZRX roller where you can not have those row cleaners on there and just run it straight. So there's a lot of options when we look at that. So back to our setup with a fairly immature stand of cover crop and then a fairly mature heavy stand. So just a little bit also, this fall we had pretty good weather, and with my son helping out on the operation, we're able to get cover crops established very well. And you can see the grain drill running behind the combine here. In our case, we're planting cereal rye to harvest for seed production, but the same situation could be in any case for cover crop after soybean harvest. The best situation, right, is to follow as close to the combine as you can, because generally the conditions are more favorable from that standpoint. And that's one of the big limitations we realize that exists on a lot of farms, is just having the manpower to get out there and get it done. And then so with the corn being a small grain rotation, getting the cover crop planted into the corn stover. There you go. Any questions that we can take?
All right, I think those two, Cody's and what Jay has presented here, provide an excellent introduction to the issue of planting green in the spring of 2020 and any other spring. So let's go something here. I'll start with Eric Niemeyer, because maybe he'll talk about this. We've got a soil health case study that Mark Wilson is working with. Mark's sitting right here, and Eric is the first farmer to be featured in that. So you've got a few handouts of this if you want more information. So Eric, go ahead.
Can we just talk about laboration and how you are planting in the spring?
Yeah.
Okay. So spring planting, we choose to plant green on our farm, whether it's corn or soybeans. And then depending on the farm and the situation there, we either chemically terminate the cover crop, or we use an I&J 30-foot roller crimper to go in and terminate behind the planter. It's been our choice to plant first and then go back and roll and crimp or terminate the cover crop later. And we do like to try to push the envelope to get as much growth as we can in the springtime on our cover crop. So.
Since I'm here. Yeah, so I don't know if y'all have been out to our farm this summer. We had the field day there on the 29th, and Cody hit on some of those cover crops. That was it was an eye opener for me because it was in my backyard. I was kind of against putting the oats out because I'm like, well, you can't make any money with oats. But anyway, then we put this really elaborate mix in there, and then I got to watch it all summer, late summer and fall. And Cody was out a couple times here, and we just took a spade out there to start digging, and it's just amazing to see the soil difference. And yes, I've been doing no-till and cover crops for a while now. Probably been cover crops for about 10 years or so, more or less.
on about everything. And no-till maybe the last 4 or 5 on a lot of things, but after seeing that this summer, it just kind of opens your eyes and you're just like, whoa, there's a lot more to this than just the cereal rye or maybe another blend. We usually would go, we got like barley, rapeseed, and vetch, or, you know, we had like the last couple of years, I think we was up to about 6 or 7 varieties. You know, it's so hard to get it established, you know, after soybeans or after corn. And so by having that summer harvested crop of wheat or oats or what have you, it just buys you that huge window to get all those covers going in the summer. And now I'm looking at it going, wow, you know, next spring I can just plant pretty much whenever. So, and I'll elaborate a little more on that. I guess I'm supposed to talk a little this afternoon, but anyway, so if you got any questions on those plots, I mean, that was kind of neat to see the difference. So.
Go to Glenn Harsh now. Go ahead.
As I said, I'm Glenn Harsh. I farm in Delaware County. I have been doing no-till since the 90s. I've been doing cover crops 6 or 8 years on about all my acres. As far as in the spring, I have a little, I farm a fair amount of acres, so we have a diverse soil types that we're dealing with, and water drainage and that type of thing too. So basically in the spring, I start spraying and spray enough acreage to plant for like 2 to 3 days, and then I reevaluate. If it looks like it's going to be heavy rains or a long period of rain, at that time that I'm spraying, I will continue spraying to try to get ahead of things and make sure that the cover crops don't get too big. I'm not as gutsy to want to plant into the waist high, chest high stuff. I have gotten in trouble. One year I did get in trouble doing that, and when you have a lot of acres to get over, that gets to be a pain really, really quick. So I at that time, I evaluate whether there's a high chance that that cover crop's going to get too big on me. If it is, I keep the sprayer rolling and get things down to a manageable situation. If it looks like it's good conditions and we're not going to get into those long-term situations where the cover crop's going to get too big, I will stop spraying, and so I can keep planting into green cover crops and make that work. I do not have a roller. I just use Roundup or my normal pre-emerge program to control my cover crops in the spring. As far as getting them established, Eric puts all my cover crops on with the high boy in my corn ground, and on the soybean, we try to get over it with a turbo seeder and get as many acres done as we can, and still, get a decent cover crop. Sometimes we don't get over every acre of soybean ground, but with every other year rotating corn, at least my corn ground gets a good crop, every other year. So that's kind of how I do it.
All right. Well, this is going to be working. All right. What we want to do is get questions from you folks here. So I have a feeling, let me ask this, how many of you have planted into a green cover crop in the spring? That's pretty impressive, isn't it? How many are going to be planting into a cover crop for the first time, no, dead or green, this coming spring? All right, we got a few right here. Let's just start. Any questions from you folks? You're the ones who are really looking for answers from these experienced folks up here. You're also. All right, let's go over here.
One of you guys talking about heritage or whatever, and I put a heritage down to 13 way mix. And as last spring wasn't real fun year anyhow. And so I had sprayed ahead of time. That doggone area veg, it was right here. Were the better ones green or you guys have an answer for that or not?
Area veg will catch just about everything. Yeah, so that's one thing. That's why the crop roller works really well in that situation to get it laid down. One thing for us, we only run the coulter in front of the double disc opener, so there's not much to catch on our planters. So that's one thing that we have to set up.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think planter setup is key, and ours is simple as well, like the brand's is, and I think simple is better. I also agree that making sure that your components are within spec is absolutely critical.
Part of my problem is my marked opener in the front, track wheels, I even had them all the way up, and it's like it just catches on everything.
I like hairy vetch, and it's like an awesome legume, excellent nitrogen source. But, you know, with everything, there's something that draws back, you know, and so the vetch has caused many problems over the years. We've eluded a lot of those. We run the shark tooth row cleaner with the wide treader band and just let them float now, and they actually just kind of move it to the side. You can't use a spike wheel of any kind, because even on the closing wheels or drag chains, because it always catches, you know. But we haven't had too much trouble with it here the last few years, and we planted into some pretty big stuff. But I recommend the roller as well, because we got a 40-foot INJ that's on an old John Deere corn planter frame, and we'll run that with RTK the same way as a planter, and it just eliminates a lot of problems if we're into that much vetch, you know. So, yeah.
Any other comments? We'll go to another question here, Phil.
Okay, one beautiful picture of planting. I wish you had some pictures of that stand coming through that big heavy cover. That's one question. The other question, what are you doing about slugs with that kind of a cover?
Our experience has been that with the cover crop, there's less damage from slugs because they prefer the cover crop to the corn from that standpoint. The same with the rye stand, with the soybeans. So having the green cover crop allows for better slug management. So the other part is that we have other insects that can hate the slugs as well. So the population doesn't cause enough crop damage to be impact on yield.
Other questions over here, anywhere? Clear in the back.
Do you notice any difference in size of the cover crop if you plant it too early in the fall, as far as the rye getting too big or too thick in the spring?
Okay, so the question was, if you planted earlier in the fall, would your cover get too big in the spring? Yeah. I haven't found that to be true. We planted rye, well, with the highboy, late July all the way up till Thanksgiving with a big A, just spread it on top of the ground. And it comes up in the spring. It just takes a little longer to come, but of course it depends on the spring too, you know.
Right.
So.
I have seen some variance in when you plant it and how good a stand you have established. Yeah, that's where you really gotta start watching it and deciding how thick that stand is and whether you want to get it killed off a little bit earlier or not. I know everybody doesn't agree with that, but if it gets established and is really thick in the fall, you will tend to have a thicker growth in the spring too. And you gotta watch that a little bit closer and manage it a little more intensively.
I think, and I wanted to comment, Glenn made a good point earlier. I farm personally a fraction of the number of acres that Glenn does. So it's easy for me to stand up here and say, I'll plant everything green and this, that, and the other. I think it's very important to recognize that the management of cover crops on your individual farm, based on your acres, your manpower, your equipment, it's individual, right? So in some cases, you know, it can get away from you and be hard to manage.
To touch on that also, in addition to farming, I have a soil consulting business and I sell cover crops, so I get a lot of questions about that. I would encourage everybody to try a field or a half a field or something with planting green, but there's a lot of, not so many here, but across the state, there's a lot of new people trying cover crops. You need to do what you're really comfortable with, and you need to learn on a smaller scale before you blow it up real big, because there is definitely a learning curve of what we're doing up here, and you need to learn how it works on your farm, and you definitely need to be comfortable with what you're doing, because sometimes it just takes sheer guts to go ahead and try some of these things. So try it on a small scale. If you're going to plant green, make sure you've done some research on it and that you're committed to making it work.
If you're decided you're going to plant green, does that influence your selection of the cover crop mix? Or are there going to be some species you might want to avoid if you're going to plant green for the first time? I see some answers yes. Somebody respond.
Yeah, so just a couple quick comments on that. I think that's where you got to look at the whole system. What is your equipment? What's your equipment program? So then just kind of work backwards from that. If you're not willing to, set your planter up to the hilt, which is fine. I mean, that certainly comes with an expense. Okay, just kind of take where you're at and then work backwards from there and work with your cover crop dealer to come up with some different solutions. So maybe you don't want, we'll just say one type of legume, we'll just say hairy vetch. If that concerns you, you can go into like crimson clover, a little bit easier to manage, and you can also play with the seeding rate too. So there's a lot of things you can do on the back end. Like I say, just kind of work backwards from your starting point, and you can usually come up with a pretty good solution.
The other thing, it depends on your following crop, right? So with corn, which is a high nitrogen demand, you probably want to have some legume in the mix or have a good fertility program. I mean, if you've got available manure, of course, that's one way to offset legumes, is to have that available. But in soybeans, we don't want to have a lot of residual nitrogen left over. So a little bit of legume probably won't hurt from that standpoint to offer diversity. But primarily, you want to have something like cereal rye or to have annual ryegrass going to like soybeans, just to manage that the nitrogen level.
All right, other questions? All right.
Question on economics.
Question on economics. I've heard farmers say in relation to your practices, if I farmed like they did, my banker would be knocking on the door. Can you give some idea as to how you view the economics part of this?
My partner in life is an accountant, a CPA, and I have to answer these questions a lot, particularly early on. And I still have to answer these questions on a year-to-year basis, but the soil tilth and the stability of my crop has improved greatly through this process. That has helped a lot. That is tough to prove early on in this process. But that part of it is there. It just takes a little while to get to it. You also are, in many cases, replacing tillage with that too. And there is a direct offset there because, with the cost of equipment and the cost of fuel and the cost of tillage points and stuff to put on those tools, you definitely have an offset of not having to keep all that equipment up to help pay for that cover crop on a year-to-year basis. So, but you do have to push the pencil on it. And there again, that's another reason to start, on a smaller scale and work your way up so that you can prove to yourself or to your banker, or in my case, my accountant, what we need to do.
I think there's a lot of evidence with soybeans, especially with weed management from that standpoint, where you can eliminate a post pass or a secondary post pass for weed control. So that's something that you can look to offset that cost, because cereal rye, specifically across soybeans, would be maybe half of what herbicide pass would be, depending on what you're putting on your management there. So, and then for nitrogen fertility, you know, you should be able to potentially reduce your fertility profile based on the cost of the cover crop. Look at that. So.
Yeah, with all of this, I think the message though is it's a process, right? Can't go out the first year and start cutting nutrient application, herbicide applications, or eliminating them, but it's over time, right? It's like a bank account. We're adding, we're building soil health, and we're able to eliminate some of the other input costs as a result.
How about talking about when you guys start getting into cover crops? You were used to using probably some pretty long-term residuals, and how that cover crops affected your herbicide.
Okay, yeah, I'll take that and go first. So I'm a first-generation farmer. This is my 15th growing season, and we started no-till in 2008. And it was 2013, 2014 we started experimenting with cover crop. I guess, you know, it's been a process to get to where we are now. Ask me the question again, Harold.
How did your previous herbicide program
Practice,
affect
okay,
the choices
yeah.
that you would get?
Yep. So obviously, okay, so the question was, how did our previous herbicide program change from where we were then to where we are now, okay? And for me, on my operation, you know, we were full tillage, and I mean, I literally started with a moldboard plow and a collet mulcher and an end wheel drill and a disc and all that. So we eliminated all of that tillage equipment, first of all, at the cleanse point. So that was dollars in equipment maintenance, fuel, and time, right? And so initially when we went to no-till, we were using a pretty aggressive herbicide program to manage weeds and some other pesticides as well along in there, fungicides, insecticides in particular. We have now transitioned to a point where for the last 4 years, we have not used any residual herbicides at all on our farm. The last 2 years, we've not used any fungicide, and we've not used any insecticide either. Now, we've measured and watched, you know, we've had some insect problems, and we've not, you know, had to go in, there wasn't an economic threshold to go in and treat that. So it's not perfect, but, you know, we're able to eliminate some of those inputs and reduce those costs from that perspective. What have we seen as a result of that? Some of us had dinner last night, and we were talking a little bit about some of the practices here in Ohio, and as a result of that, I've watched the cover crop stands on my farm get better year after year after year. We go out there, we've converted a high boy to go out there and apply cover crops into standing crop prior to harvest. And the primary reason that we did that was to get early established, get the cover crops growing early. We wanted to get to a point where we were using multiple species and getting the maximum benefit out of that, okay? It's not perfect, not at all. Our stands are not perfect, but as the farther away we get from the aggressive use of pesticides, the healthier the soil gets, the better those stands have gotten over the years, and the more effective the cover crops have become.
On the residual herbicides, I have cut the rates back. That has been somewhat of a process of learning where you need to be to control the weeds long enough so you can get back in there with your post-emerge spray. You do have to watch post-emerge sprays too, because some of them have some longevity. So keep an eye on that, and there are some more resources on the internet now, but do your research on what herbicides you're using and what rates that you're going to use. Particularly like on my corn ground where Eric comes in and hopefully in August and puts the cover crop on, and you need to make sure that you watch how much atrazine you have out there and some of the longer lasting herbicides. So, but there are choices. You can make it work.
Any questions? Yeah, more questions? Right here, let me.
I guess the guys out there probably know till long or whatever, and I'm sure you all take soil test. Have you noticed any difference over the years that doing this kind of program actually brought anything up, or did you still need to put on potash and phosphorus, that sort of thing, or not?
Over time, with the small grain in rotation, we would see an elevation of P and K quite a bit, to the point where we're taking off all the straw now just to manage P and K levels from that standpoint, and kind of following with the heavy cover crop from that standpoint. The other part is even with straw removal, now we're seeing the P and K come down. We still I don't think we put on potash, other than for the small. We do a small amount of potash when we plant small grains. But pretty much we don't do lime or anything, probably for the last 15, 20 years on most of the ground that we have, unless we pick up a new farm that really needs some help from that standpoint. Because we do have that, cover crop most every year of some type, but at least every third year we follow the small grain where we can get a decent crop out of it. So we do see some movement there.
Small grain helps more than any other crop up here.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. That's what we've seen. It's, I think, if we're just corn bean rotation, then we have to do more as far as added inputs, looking at that from that standpoint. But we do use pop-up fertilizer in the past with corn and soybeans. We took a couple of years off because we changed the drill set liquid on it. So now we're back to liquid. We may do some more pop-up with soybeans, but we'll have to see how that conditions. We're planting those a little.
As far as to directly answer your question, we also switched to manure about the same time or chicken litter about the same time that we started with the cover crops. So it's a little hard for us to tell, which is changing our balance out there. One thing I will say, we also, in our consulting business, we invested in a deep sampler. It's actually a probe that goes down, it comes up and puts half the sample in one bucket and the other half the sample in another bucket, so we can get deep cores. There is a difference even with long-term no-till as to what's in the top 7 inches and what's in 7 to 15 inches. We are doing research to try to find out how we can get that balanced out. One option is, of course, strip till and actually putting the nutrients down there in the fall, but I have a strip tiller, I've had one for years. It's a tough thing to get done every fall. You gotta have somebody's butt to put in that seed is right behind your combine, and sometimes that's a challenge, especially if you put fertilizer on it too. But we do need to work towards getting that whole profile. I don't know if you guys have pulled any with your longer no-till, but I have had several people discuss with me that we feel that we can change that with cover crops by having that root system pulling those nutrients through the profile. We have yet to prove that though.
You say going through the profile, because one of the problems I've noticed is my potash seems to be dropping or whatever. And I guess my question is, a lot of so-called professors say we got enough potash to last us 10 lifetimes. So why are we not getting in the bed? I guess it's kind of
His issue is with your potash levels drop. I think that's interesting because we are having a lot of trouble with not just me, but also I see it on my clients' farms that through tissue sampling, we're having a hard time of keeping the potash levels where they need to be throughout the season. And I don't know if that's something to do with stratification or whether that's something to do with the excess rains that we've been having, or what's really playing a part in it. But that has been a trend that we're seeing, and I've talked to other consultants, I see some out here that are seeing similar things. We are doing some experimentation of using Y drops to put potash right there next to the root to see if we can keep that tissue level even throughout the season, other than just trying to amend it on the soil. So we'll see how all that goes. But potash has been an issue for us too.
I think you're right with, and I'll get you in a minute, with no-till, that what's more important is having the nutrients right at the surface. Same thing with moisture, that the roots tend to be at the surface. Any comment on that?
I guess I'm holding the mic. Well, yeah, we are seeing them, but there again, with the potash, we have the decent levels at the surface on our ground, and we're not getting into the plant throughout the growing season. So, yeah, I think some more studies need to be done with that, and I think with some of the initiatives in the state that will happen. But, yeah, I don't have a real concrete answer on that for sure.
All right, another question.
You touched on it a little bit with your row spacing. What's your row spacing, and what's your planter setups as far as corn and bean planting?
I'll address mine real quick. I'm on 30-inch row corn, and I'm on twin row beans. I've had good luck with the twin rows. It's nice to be able to easily stay off of the corn rows with the twin row soybeans and get some more air. We do have some good black ground that we have some trouble with white mold, and it's certainly helped out with the white mold.
We got 30-inch row corn. We did have twin row beans just for the access of running a high boy through. We actually built one of our own as well a few years back, and you could get through the beans, and I agree with the air. You could get more air through them. We're back to 15-inch row beans just because of logistics. Not really seeing any problems with that. And then this year we put in the wheat in 10-inch rows, which I'd like to get down to a narrower row somehow, but can't quite get that all figured out. But, yeah.
I'm 30-inch row corn, 15-inch row beans. Pretty simple planter setup. We've got no-till coulter, double disc openers, and closing wheels. On our corn rows, we do run precision technology to try to ensure seed depth and placement and singulation. Again, because we do like to plant green, so try to use that to ensure.
Yes, we're 30-inch corn rows, and we're doing some 15-inch row soybeans. You saw with the splitter planter, but we've gone pretty much to solid stand 7.5-inch row soybeans today, just because we're running both planters at the same time, usually on that. So we were drilling with a smaller drill before, and now we got the 30-footer, so we can get beans done before the corn gets halfway done now. So.
Yeah, we did add wheat back into our rotation this fall too, and we're drilling wheat at 7.5.
That just reminded me of a good question. How many of you include wheat typically in your rotations? That's a good number. Yes, so that's good. Not sure how to phrase this. I know what Bill Richards' comment's going to be. He likes corn. But I think you've heard a comment up here that if you have wheat or another equivalent crop, so you can get the cover crop planted in July or early August, it really gives you advantages in terms of the soil health and the cover crop performance. Any other comment clear back there?
What are you planting in the standing corn, and how early are you willing to go to plant that?
What do we are applying in the fall? Okay. More often than not, cereal rye is part of that mix. In some cases, it's strictly cereal rye. We've done cereal rye, quite a bit of rape, and usually a legume in there too, a lot of times. Bushel of cereal rye, 40 pounds to a bushel of cereal rye, 2-3 pounds of rape, and then a couple 3 pounds of a legume.
How early?
Our experience, we started after tasseling typically. More often than not, it's been end of July, 1st of August.
When you guys interseed grain
in the B5?
So we have a machine that we do that with. We rent it out. Oh, so we have basically a 20-foot box drill that we took road units out to run there. So it's real simple, easy to use. Where we are south of I-70, it's kind of spotty to get success with that. We have one customer that's got good success, and he's right on I-70, but he's got his situation set up for success with that, and it works very well. I think if you get north of I-80, you're going to have a lot more success, and I would say the earlier the better, probably around V3. So you have to have good weed control and really manage your herbicide program for that to be really effective. So we don't have good weed control, so our post-application usually takes out the cover crop. So that's where we got to manage that really well. But I think what we're seeing just outside of Columbus, where we're at, is much later. If you're going aerial seeded, probably closer into the early September, guys are having better success just because we tend to dry out a little bit late August, and then in September we catch some rain, so we get much better establishment. So that being said, back when we had our high voice seeder, I was usually really disappointed when the corn came off with what the cover crop looked like, but within 2 weeks it looked a lot better. So it's usually how it worked out. But I think the very late August, early September seeding with a high borean airplane tends to work better in the southern part of the state, and you may go a little earlier northern. But a lot has to do with that, with your corn canopy structure as well. If you're going more upright leaf corn or lower populations, you can get in a little earlier. And if you're going high populations, you're going to really stress those plants really good, trying to broadcast into standing crop.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes, so I'm going to suggest that we each have to make some closing comment or remark, and as far as I know, they're all going to be here all day, so there'll be plenty of opportunity to get one-on-one questions answered with them. So do you want to start, Jake?
I think as we look towards the spring, with a lot of us having the cover crops in place now, just to kind of watch that. And as everybody's talked about, it is a lot about management. So you have to think ahead about what you're going to do. Look at the fields that are in there and how you know they need to be managed, especially for moisture. That's one of the things. We've gotten more and more comfortable planting into the jungle, that we have to watch for soil moisture and be very careful with that, because we've had some reduced stands because of that, especially since we're going with untreated seeds, so we have some issue with phytophthora that we have to be very careful about with untreated seed planting, even later in May, where we're generally targeting. So again, it's about management and try to know your conditions there.
Okay, a couple closing thoughts here. I think it's very important for everybody to have backup plans and actually go as far as trying to write those down and make sure everything's in place. That way, if the weather changes, something breaks, whatever, you can shift from plan A to B, C to D, whatever, and not cause undue stress and help cut down any time loss too. So I think that's very important, especially with cover crops. And along with that, I think, especially if you're starting out, don't be afraid to fail. Try and limit your risk maybe with a smaller plot of something new, but don't be afraid to fail, but to take that a step further, learn from it, and move on. So that's really all I have. Thank you.
I would just say, do try planting some green. Do the amount of acres that you are comfortable with. Don't go overboard, walk before you run, and have a plan to get it killed off in a stage that you're comfortable with, so that you can have success with the program.
I would probably follow up with that as well. It's a confidence level that you all have to be at. I've got a neighbor next door to me that every time I change something in the operation, he would be like, I'm not so sure about that, And then a couple years later, he'd be trying. And then it'd just go on. And he went from whole bore plowing to full-on no-till with all cover crops now. And it's just amazing to watch him do that. But I kept telling him, I'm like, you have to do what you're comfortable with. And if you don't know, then ask questions. And not one of us sitting here knows all the answers. And you guys probably have more answers than we do. But we all have to learn from each other. So don't be afraid to ask questions to people and build that confidence level as you go forward so that you can do it right the first time, or at least, try it. So.
Three comments. Try it on a scale that you're comfortable with. Number two, this is a spectrum, so each of us up here is at a different spot on that spectrum and have different experiences. And number three, I'll speak for all of us, I think, here, but we're an open book. We're more than happy to talk with you and answer any questions, tell you the pitfalls, tell you the successes that we've had. So thank you for your time.
All right, let's round of applause for our panelists.